Hello everyone. Welcome to the news on December 20, 2022. The first one is US-related news. US-made missiles destroyed over western Russia. A barrage of anti-radar harm projectiles was intercepted midair, the Russian Defense Ministry says. 4 US-made GM-88 harm aircraft-fired anti-radar missiles have been shot down over Russia's Belgorod region, which shares a border with Ukraine, the Russian Defense Ministry reported on Monday. It added that Russian air defenses in the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics and the Zaporozhye region also intercepted 6 rockets fired by US-made HIMARS launchers and Soviet-designed Uragan systems. The news came after Ukrainian troops shelled the city of Belgorod and other areas in the eponymous region on Sunday, killing 1 person and injuring 10 others, according to Governor Vyacheslav Gladkov. He wrote on his Telegram channel that 75 residential and industrial buildings were damaged, as well as around 40 cars. Gladkov said that the shelling continued on Monday, leaving around 14,000 residents in the city of Shebekino without power. He added that 2 more people were wounded overnight. Belgorod and other Russian regions that share a border with Ukraine have repeatedly come under attack after Moscow launched a military operation in the neighboring state in late February. Several U.S. news organizations reported last week that the Pentagon was finalizing plans to supply Kiev with MIM-104 Patriot air defense missile systems. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov responded by saying that, if delivered, the systems would be treated as legitimate targets for Russian troops. Russian news agency RIA Novosti cited an investigation document on Friday as saying that drones used to attack the country's Belgorod, Kursk and Voronezh regions, as well as Crimea, contained parts manufactured by U.S. firm Spectra Works. The Times quoted a U.S. defense source last week as saying that the Pentagon quietly greenlit long-range strikes on Russian territory. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken previously maintained that the White House was not encouraging attacks on Russian soil. Next newsletter is Ukrainian-related news. Ukrainian shelling hits hospital in Donetsk. The hospital in the Kalininsky district of Donetsk suffered a 3rd strike in 2 weeks as the city came under fresh rocket and artillery attacks from Ukrainian forces, the local authorities said on Monday night. The strike that took place around 11 p.m. local time caused no casualties among the patients, but completely devastated the clinic section of the hospital. The night guard survived the attack as she took cover behind a safe upon hearing the whistling of incoming projectiles, Badma Bashankayev, a member of the Russian parliament's lower house, told reporters. The facility took a direct hit, with photos and videos shared by local journalists showing a huge hole in the facade and most windows blown out, as well as piles of rubble and debris inside and outside of the hospital. Another section of the hospital hosting the neurosurgery department was damaged by shelling on Sunday, while the neurology department was damaged in the December 11 strike. Next newsletter is Kremlin-related news. Kremlin responds to EU gas price cap. The measure disrupts the market process of setting prices, Putin's spokesman has said. Any attempts to set a gas price cap are unacceptable, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told journalists on Monday, adding that Russia would provide an appropriate response to such a move. His words came as the EU energy ministers agreed on a gas price ceiling mechanism, according to Reuters. This is a violation of the market price discovery process, an infringement upon the market process itself, Peskov told journalists, adding that any references to the ceiling cannot be accepted. Russia would need time to carefully evaluate all pros and cons while working on its response measures, he noted, adding that a response to the oil cap had been somewhat delayed for similar reasons. The oil price ceiling was introduced by the EU, G7 countries, and Australia earlier this month. Russia has so far not officially unveiled any measures in response. However, Peskov previously said that a relevant presidential decree was being finalized. According to the Russian newspaper Vedomosti, Moscow would ban oil sales under contracts that specify a price ceiling. Exports would also be prohibited to nations that require the cap as a condition in their supply deals, or if their reference prices are fixed at the cap level of $60 per barrel. Earlier on Monday, the EU energy ministers reportedly agreed on a mechanism to try to bring down the high gas prices that have hit the bloc's economies amid its attempts to rid itself of Russian imports. According to Reuters, the cap would be triggered if prices surpass €180 per megawatt-hour for 3 days on the Dutch Tidal Transfer Facility (TTF) front-month contract. The cap would freeze trading on the front-month to front-year TTF contracts at a price exceeding a certain reference level by no more than €35 per megawatt-hour. The reference level would be set on the basis of existing liquefied natural gas (LNG) price assessments, Reuters added. Next newsletter is Greece-related news. Russia threatens Greece with consequences for arming Ukraine. Athens would violate its treaties with Moscow if it sent missile defense systems to Kiev, the Russian Foreign Ministry has warned. Russia would consider a Greek plan to provide Ukraine with S-300 air defense systems previously acquired from Moscow to be an openly hostile act, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Sunday. Greece has mulled sending such Soviet-era arms to Kiev if the U.S. agrees to replace them with MIM-104 Patriot systems. That would be a gross violation of Russian-Greek agreements on military and technical cooperation, Zakharova stated, adding that both the 1995 and 2013 treaties signed by Moscow and Athens in this field explicitly forbid Greece to re-export the military equipment supplied by Russia without Moscow's consent. Trampling on its commitments under the treaties is bound to have consequences, the ministry's spokeswoman warned. Such a move would also conflict with the position of most Greeks, she said, adding that 70% of Greeks oppose pumping Ukraine with arms, according to polls. Although Zakharova did not cite her source, a survey conducted by Greek broadcaster Mega TV in March showed that some two-thirds of Greeks were against sending military equipment to Kiev. Athens is considering delivering to Ukraine its long-range S-300 air defense missile system stationed on the island of Crete. On Sunday, Greek Defense Minister Nikolaos Panagiotopoulos said that such a move would be possible as soon as the U.S. replaces them with Patriots. If the United States installs a Patriot system on the island and after it is integrated, connected to the National Air Defense System, then the S-300 can be removed, Panagiotopoulos told a Greek Defense Ministry meeting. The recent statements from Greece demonstrate a U-turn in the nation's position since June. At that time, Panagiotopoulos maintained that Athens will not be sending the S-300 weapon systems to Ukraine since it needs them at home. Moscow has repeatedly warned the West that arms shipments to Ukraine only prolong the conflict. Earlier this month, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that the West had de facto turned Ukraine into a colony, and was using Ukrainians as cannon fodder, and a battering ram against Russia while supplying Kiev with weapons. Next newsletter is Lukashenko-related news. Belarus and Russia have mostly managed to mitigate the effects of primitive, Western sanctions, which have hurt the common people of the EU instead, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko said in Minsk on Monday. Thanks to steps we've taken together, we generally managed to overcome the possible negative effects of the sanctions pressure, Lukashenko said at a joint press conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin, complimenting the sanctions specialists from both countries on a job well done. The US and its EU allies have embarked on a sweeping embargo against Russia and Belarus in February, citing the escalating conflict in Ukraine. Lukashenko described the sanctions as primitive, and said they've had a boomerang effect, instead, hitting the ordinary people and enterprises on the European continent, but not those who started an economic war against our country, and a proxy war against Russia, to the last Ukrainian. Meanwhile, the Russian president agreed that Moscow and Minsk have, confidently and effectively, resisted illegal restrictive measures imposed by unfriendly states. Putin and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrived in Minsk on Monday for a series of talks with their Belarusian counterparts about economic, military, and energy cooperation. Next newsletter is Russia-related news. U.S. has put itself and Russia on brink of direct clash. Washington's dangerous and short-sighted policy has put it on the brink of a direct clash with Moscow, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said on Monday, responding to U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price, who blamed Russia last week for making relations between the two countries unstable and unpredictable. Moscow has genuinely strived to make relations with the U.S. stable and predictable, even as Washington stokes tensions, Zakharova added. It is the U.S. desire to maintain American hegemony at all costs, as well as its arrogant unwillingness to engage in a serious dialogue on security guarantees, that led to the current crisis, the spokeswoman said. Russia is calling on the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden to avoid further escalation, Zakharova said, adding that Moscow still wants to defuse tensions and is open to talking to the U.S. at various levels. However, the U.S. is openly lying about maintaining contacts with Russia, Zakharova claimed. Last week, Price said that Secretary of State Antony Blinken still keeps in touch with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Zakharova called the statement a banal lie, adding that the last time the two diplomats spoke was July 29. Amid the Russian military operation in Ukraine, Washington has provided massive amounts of financial and military aid to Kiev and has led the drive for sanctions on Moscow, which was also joined by U.S. allies in the EU and elsewhere. The conflict in Ukraine broke out after the U.S. rejected Russia's proposals for security guarantees in Europe, including a limit on NATO expansion to the east. Moscow repeatedly warned that Ukraine's potential membership in the U.S.-led military bloc would cross a red line and that arming Kiev would only prolong the conflict. Thanks for watching. Please click Live and subscribe for new update.